And welcome back to Racing Rundown. This is our final installment of our Kentucky Derby Power 5 series. We took a little bit of a deviation, I should say, last time we did a Power 10 because we had some scratches and dynamics completely changed up, but we're going to go back to the usual. This is on the day that we're recording this, and presumably the day that this goes out, we are a week away from the draw of the Kentucky Derby. So this also means that after this, we will be starting up our Kentucky Derby profiles. I'm hoping to get the first 5 or 6 of those out over the course of the next couple of days, and across this week, we will do our best to get the most of those out as much as we can, given that there are still a few horses that haven't confirmed for the Derby or don't have confirmed jockeys yet, so that does preclude us slightly. But with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Eric to start us off with the number 5 horse on this list, like we always do. So, Eric, take it away.
Thanks, Jack. And at number 5 in this final edition of the 2023 Power 5, we're going to put Derma Sotogake, the Japanese shipper who did such good work in the Middle East this year. A colt who obviously looked very good winning the UAE Derby last time out. If you watched it, you know he went to the lead. He's had a very cozy trip and never looked back. And it's very easy to be skeptical of that performance because of the tactics of that race. There was a likely track bias at the time this race was run to in that late afternoon to evening while the sun was still out at Maidan. So easy horse to knock in that sense, but when you dive into his form, you go watch the replays and you look at it, his 4 runs in Japan on the dirt, his run in Saudi Arabia, his run in Dubai, he has checked a lot of boxes that make him a reasonable horse for the Kentucky Derby. For one, he likes distance. He's won twice at a mile and an eighth and another at a mile and 3/16. And in those wins, he's done it in different ways. When he broke his maiden, he pressed the leader, sat a very close second. When he came from off the pace to win that stakes race in December, he came from probably 6 lengths back. When he won in the Dubai, he went wire to wire. So versatility is his best asset, and that's going to carry him a really long way in this Kentucky Derby. He has the distance experience. The biggest thing is the ship. We know the history behind the UAE Derby. I think the numbers 18 horses have started in the UAE Derby. No one's finished better than 5th. Even some nice horses like Mendelssohn, Crown Pride last year looked like legitimate contenders. They had their own reasons for losing, but they also don't know the North American, the American style of dirt racing. So tons to weigh there, but an intriguing prospect with immense talent.
And we're going to move on now to the number 4 entrant on this list, and that's Angel of Empire, the winner of the Arkansas Derby. Started off a bit lower key than a lot of these other Kentucky Derby trail horses, broke his maiden, and his first 2 wins came at Horseshoe, Indiana. Then he ran second in the Smarty Jones behind Victory Formation, but 2 really nice wins as of late. And he really has improved from 2 to 3, and basically you can kind of include the Smarty Jones if you want to in his 2-year-old campaign, as that race was on New Year's Day. So yes, technically a 3-year-old, but effectively 2 races as a 3-year-old, and he improved really well in the Risen Star and got even better in the Arkansas Derby. The big issue with him is, how much better is he than the rest of this group? Because I know the metrics from the Arkansas Derby weren't the greatest, but at the same time, we've seen the improvement there, and he came from about halfway back in the field in the Arkansas Derby, give or take, and ended up winning there by over 4 lengths. So it was a very visually impressive win, certainly built on the good form that he picked up in the Risen Star. So I think he's going to be going into the Kentucky Derby off of a stretch of 2 really solid races, and an endorsement of him came from Flavian Pratt, who, when given the choice, has already chosen him over Kings Barnes, who won the Louisiana Derby, and he chose him rather quickly. So if you're someone who likes to read in between the lines, I do like to read in between the lines. So if you're someone who likes to read in between the lines that way, maybe that's another thing to consider with Angel of Empire, our number 4 spot on this list.
And at number 3, we have one of the 3 Todd Pletcher trainees in this year's Kentucky Derby field. Could have been 4 by the time you listen to this, but for now it's 3. That's Tapit Trice, the winner of the Bluegrass Stakes, imposing son of Tapit with a classic distance pedigree, with Dunkirk coming through on the dam side. A big, obviously great horse with those lines, who's rattled off 4 wins in a row after running a decent third on debut at Aqueduct, broke his maiden in the next, and then went down to Florida, knocked out a pair of races there, including the Tampa Bay Derby, which was his two-turn debut, and finally wrapped things up with a win in the Bluegrass. Now, the Bluegrass was only by a neck, and sure they were 6 lengths short of third, but he won by a neck. But he had to move into a pretty slow pace that day, and the horse that went with him the entire length of the stretch, Verifying, was up front. He was helping carve out those fractions. So it was a gutty win. It was a race that also showed some professionalism because he put himself in the race a lot earlier than he had in the past. For instance, Tampa Bay Derby took him a very long time to get going when Luis Saez, who will be aboard for the Derby and has ridden him in his last 3 starts, pushed the button on him. He took a while, but in the Bluegrass, he moved up at every point asked, and then while he did have a little bit of trouble putting Verifying away, I don't know if that was Tapit Trice's fault as much as it was Verifying keeping on towards the end. So a very, very talented runner, one that's going to appreciate the mile and a quarter. Biggest knock will be, I'd say, he could be his own worst enemy. We saw him take a while to get going at Tampa, as I mentioned, but he's also slow from the gate. If you watch his last 3 races, especially, even his maiden win, but I think you'll stick to the 2023 form alone, he does have a tendency to miss the break, and obviously could maybe make up for it when it's a slow pace in the Bluegrass and you have a good jockey like Luis Saez to maneuver around it, but maybe isn't the same thing in a 20-horse field, tighter gate in the Kentucky Derby. So something to really consider, but once again, another horse who has the talent to win a race like this if they can get the right trip. And on to number 2, that's where we have Practical Move, who's also second in the point standings leading into this year's Kentucky Derby. A colt who's developed really nicely for the Tim Yakteen barn. Yakteen's had him in his barn every single step of the way, and he really has no bad losses and only good wins. I think that you go through his resume, and you cannot say he's done anything wrong in his career. He started off sprinting at Del Mar over the summer, and it really wasn't his game. He was losing to some really talented horses in those races, K-Rock and National Treasure, and then he technically didn't get a win until the stakes level. He was put up via disqualification in his 3rd career start, which was a 2-turn mile, at Santa Anita, but was beaten a length and a half, but placed first, then lost another stakes against another good sprinter having a meltdown before his 3-race win streak, which started in the Los Alamitos Futurity, which at first glance, he didn't beat much, but he was a professional win and really embodied the fact he's a 2-turn horse, and then he put on 2 really good performances at Santa Anita in his 2 starts in 2023, won the San Felipe, and then the Santa Anita Derby by only a nose, but it was a slightly tougher race that day. But sat the same good trip in both of them, tucked inside of horses, right behind the leaders, got through under Ramon Vasquez, who put on 2 good rides. And while the San Felipe, he did pack more punch, in the Santa Anita Derby, he was closer to a quicker pace. They went really hot in those opening stages. He was a little closer to the lead at those stages in the game. The San Felipe started quick, but slowly geared down as the race went on. The Santa Anita Derby was pretty quick up until about the 3/4 mark. So all things considered, he had to make first move, being right in behind. The closers came, nearly got him, but he held him off, and he never let him by even on the gallop out. So he showed grit and determination, but obviously not a great look. And if you look at it, obviously, once again, by the time you're listening to this, things could be different. But as of now, when we record this, none of the horses he's beaten are in the Kentucky Derby at any point in his career. So you could certainly knock him for the class part of it all. But he has a winning mindset. He knows how to sit a cozy trip. He has punch. And he's probably going to be a little bit better leading into this Kentucky Derby, given his training has not been interrupted at any points. Whereas if you look at what happened in the lead up to the Santa Anita Derby, the weather in California did kind of hurt his training schedule. So another one who possesses a lot of good qualities, knows how to win horse races, but definitely has some excuses and some negatives to his resume at this stage in the game.
And we'll move on now to the number 1 horse in the point standings and the number 1 horse on this ranking. No surprise, Forte, the winner of the Florida Derby. And there have been some folks who have talked about Forte as having regressed from 2 to 3. And I understand, from a certain level, taking that viewpoint, but I'm not really super concerned about that. Number 1, because a lot of that's coming from the buyer speed figure point of view, and I really don't care that he's regressed slightly on buyer numbers, because I still think he's around the average and the mean of the rest of the crop as a whole. So I don't think, even if he has regressed, I don't really think it's to the point where it puts him in a position where he can't still be very competitive in the Kentucky Derby. But the other thing about Forte is he's very battle hardened. His 2 wins going into the Kentucky Derby will both be very nice wins in different ways. The Fountain of Youth was exceptionally easy for him. The Florida Derby was certainly not. He looked beat at the 16th pole, and he was able to overcome all of that and win by a comfortable length at the end. Obviously, you go back to his form at 2. Sanford aside, it was exceptional. This isn't anything that's surprising you. He's going to be a deserving favorite going into the Kentucky Derby. It's just going to be the thing for him is, where is he going to draw? This is going to be, and not that any Kentucky Derby isn't, but this is very much going to be a draw trip type of Kentucky Derby. But another thing that is important about him is the way that he ran in the Florida Derby absolutely indicates that he's going to get the trip of the Kentucky Derby. And I know people have been concerned about over the course of the winter about whether or not he's going to stay the 1.25 miles. He'll stay the 1.25 miles, especially given how he ran in the Florida Derby. So that's not really something that I'm concerned about. I'm not really super concerned about the slight regression that he's had from 2 to 3, because even if it is, I don't think it puts him below the mean of this crop. And his wins this year were just really good. You can't knock visually the 2 wins that he had this year. So I think he carries a lot of upside going into this Kentucky Derby. He's going to be the favorite. Sure, he can lose, but it's the Kentucky Derby. Every horse can lose. So there is a lot to like about Forte, and we will see where we will be going over the course of the next week. Of course, as I mentioned at the top of this video, we will have our Kentucky Derby profiles for the 20 Kentucky Derby starters right now over the course of the next week, and we will be back next week, probably early Tuesday morning, where we will have our 2023, our big Kentucky Derby preview, probably also have our Kentucky Oaks preview as well, and then from there, we will have Racing Rundown episode number 207 or 8. I don't remember which number we're on right now, which is probably reflects bad on me, but either way, we will have that for the Kentucky Derby episode as well. So keep an eye out for all of that, and we will see you over the course of the next week with our Kentucky Derby profiles. We'll see you then. Have a good one.